$133 a month. That is the average advertised price of an American storage unit. It is also for most customers a fiction, because that number is bait. Roughly 70% of customers rent online at a discount, $1 for the first month or the second month free. Then, somewhere between month 3 and month 9, the letter arrives. The rent goes up, then it goes up again. The industry has a name for this, a formal, spoken out loud, written in the software name. Existing customer rate increases, they call it ECRI, and it is not a tactic bolted onto the business. It is the business. One analysis found the most quoted advertised rate in the sector sits 30 to 40% below what the largest operator's occupied space actually pays. Same buildings, same units, two completely different prices. So a storage facility is not really a real estate business that raises rent. It is a pricing machine that happens to own a metal building. And the entire machine runs on one fact about human beings. Moving your own belongings is miserable, and most people will pay almost anything to avoid doing it twice. So here is the plan. We build a storage facility from zero using real numbers. Construction cost per square foot, lease-up timelines, street rates, operating margins. Then we find where the money actually compounds because it is not the rent. Then the part nobody advertises, the lawsuits, the falling rates, and the auction. Start with scale because this industry is far larger than it looks from the road. America has roughly 52,300 self-storage facilities, more than 2.1 billion square feet of rentable space. The country holds about 90% of the world's storage inventory. Annual revenue is somewhere between $44 and $50 billion. Around 11% of American households rent a unit right now. More than 70% of facilities are still independently owned. The top 5 firms control only about 37% of this space. 4 of those 5 are real estate investment trusts. Public storage alone runs about 3,300 facilities. So this is a consolidating industry. Thousands of small owners being slowly bought by a handful of large ones. Hold on to that, it explains the exit. Now the ticket price, and storage is genuinely cheap to build by commercial real estate standards. A single-story drive-up facility, the simplest kind, runs about $25 to $40 per square foot for the building package. Steel frame, concrete slab, roll-up doors, almost no interior work. Climate-controlled single-story pushes that to roughly $38 to $55. All in, including site work, soft costs, and everything else, expect roughly $70 per rentable square foot for a clean single-story drive-up site, and up to $160 for multi-story climate-controlled in a hard market. Total project cost typically lands between $2 and $10 million. Construction itself is fast, 6 to 9 months for single-story, 9 to 14 for multi-story, plus 3 to 6 months of permitting. But there is a catch, and it is the thing that kills first-time developers. You do not open full, you open empty. A new facility takes 2 to 3 years to reach stabilized occupancy, filling at maybe 2.5% of the building per month. For those years, you pay debt service on a mostly empty steel box, while discounting hard-to-pull tenants from every competitor nearby. Now, the operating economics, and this is where storage earns its reputation, the national average street rate is about $1.55 per square foot per month. Revenue per square foot lands between $14 and $22 a year in most markets. Staffing, historically the largest expense line, runs only 10 to 15% of revenue. And it is falling. Remote management and online rental have cut per facility labor costs by 30 to 50% at leading operators. There are facilities in this country with nobody on site at all. Profit margins average around 41%, but the range is enormous, 11% to 60%. The gap between a good operator and a bad one is not the building. Both bought the same steel. That is the brochure. Cheap to build, fast to build, almost nobody to pay, and a long, slow fill. Now the twist, because the rent roll is not where the money is made. There are 3 engines here, and only one of them is renting space. Engine 1 is the spread. The gap between what a new tenant pays and what an old tenant pays. Between the second quarter of 2022 and the end of 2024, the average move-in rate across the industry dropped by 33%. In-place rates over comparable periods went the other direction. New customers got cheaper, existing customers got more expensive, deliberately and simultaneously. The mechanism is psychological, and operators discuss it openly. Tenants who have been in place 9 months or longer rarely leave over a rate increase. They have settled, the unit is full. The truck rental, the friends, the lost Saturday, all of it outweighs the money. There is even a preferred cadence. 2 increases of 4% beat 1 increase of 8%. Smaller and more frequent stays under the threshold where a customer reconsiders. The industry rule of thumb is to cap any single increase around 50%, no matter what the market would bear. Not because it would fail, because it would work, and then they would leave. Engine 2 is the protection plan, and it is close to pure margin. $12 to $25 a month, covering $2,000 to $5,000 of goods. Operators keep 60 to 90% of the premium and carry none of the risk. One provider's figures show about $10.65 of monthly profit per plan, an 89% margin. At a 600 unit facility with 80% participation, it produces about $55,000 a year. $55,000 of almost cost-free income on a building that already exists. Make it mandatory at lease signing, and participation jumps from under 5% to nearly 70%. Engine 3 is the one that turns the first two into real wealth. Storage trades on a capitalization rate, currently around 5 to 7.5%, which means facilities sell for roughly 13 to 20 times their net operating income. Put the three engines together, and the arithmetic becomes obvious. Every additional dollar of annual operating income is worth $13 to $20 of sale price. A rate increase that adds $100,000 of income adds well over $1.5 million to what the building is worth. You are not raising rent to collect rent. You are raising rent to manufacture a sale price. And remember who the buyers are. 4 large trusts, systematically acquiring from thousands of small owners. The independent operator who never ran an increase in 20 years is not running a lifestyle business. He is holding an inventory of underpriced tenants, waiting for someone to reprice them. Now the risks and storage has been accumulating them quietly. Risk 1. The pricing model has finally attracted regulators. In February, the New York City Department of Consumer and Worker Protection sued Extra Space Storage. The allegations included predatory practices and bait and switch pricing. An operator in Washington state summarized the reaction in one line. The rate increase chickens, he said, had come home to roost. The comparison people inside the industry keep making is to apartment pricing software, which drew years of litigation over the same basic question. If your margin depends on a practice that reads badly in a newspaper, that margin carries regulatory risk. Risk 2. Rates are falling right now, not rising. The national average street rate in May was $133, down 2.2% from a year earlier. 70% of the 150 largest American cities posted annual rate decreases. 7 of the 10 worst were Sunbelt markets. Years of aggressive building left more storage there than demand. Risk 3, and this is the demand problem underneath the rate problem. Storage demand is driven by movement. The industry describes it as the 4 Ds: death, divorce, dislocation, downsizing. Together, those account for around 70% of demand. So the biggest driver of your revenue is how often Americans move house. When the housing market freezes, people stop moving, and your lease-up assumptions quietly stop working. You are not really selling storage. You are selling a byproduct of transactions happening somewhere else. Risk 4. The occupancy gap between operators is enormous, and it is not about location. Institutionally tracked facilities average around 92% occupancy. The broader market, including small independents, averages closer to 82. 10 full percentage points driven by pricing sophistication and revenue software. Run a facility the way its previous owner did, and you inherit the lower number. Risk 5. The strangest legal feature of this entire industry. When a tenant stops paying, you do not go to court. You do not file an eviction. Nearly every state grants storage operators a lien on the contents of the unit and a right of non-judicial foreclosure. You may sell your customers' possessions yourself. Send the notices, advertise the sale, hold the auction, keep what you are owed. No judge, no hearing, a remedy almost no other landlord in America possesses. But the procedure is unforgiving. Miss a notice deadline or advertise incorrectly, and the sale becomes wrongful. The exposure is serious enough that the industry sells insurance specifically for wrongful sales. When an insurance category exists for a specific mistake, that tells you how often the mistake happens. All right, numbers. 3 versions of this business. Scenario 1, you build new, single-story drive-up secondary market. 60,000 gross square feet. About 49,000 net rentable after hallways and offices. All in at $90 per rentable foot, including land. That is about $4.5 million. At stabilization, 90% occupancy, $1.30 per square foot per month. Gross rental revenue, roughly $690,000 a year. Add protection plans, late fees, and retail, another 10%. Total, around $760,000. Operating expenses at 40% leaves net operating income near $450,000. On $4.5 million invested, that is a 10% yield. At a 6% capitalization rate, the finished building is worth about $7.5 million. You created about $3 million of value by building rather than buying, but you waited 3 years unpaid while it filled. Scenario 2, you buy an underpriced facility and reprice it. This is the actual industry playbook. 40,000 rentable square feet, 22 years old, owned by the man who built it. It is 93% full, precisely because he never raised anyone's rent. In-place rent is $9.60 per square foot. The local street rate is near $11. Revenue about 357,000. Operating income roughly 160,000. At a 6.5% cap rate, you buy it for about $2.5 million. Then you do three things, and none of them involve construction. Staged rate increases over 24 months, lifting in-place rent toward 1150. A protection plan mandatory at signing. And rentals moved online, cutting on-site staffing. Some tenants leave. Occupancy settles near 88% instead of 93. New revenue roughly 445,000. New operating income about 220,000. At a 6% cap rate, the building is now worth 3.7 million. You added $60,000 of annual income and about $1.2 million of value. You did not pour a single yard of concrete. Scenario 3, the bad year. Every element is happening in America right now. A competitor opens 2 miles away and undercuts your street rate by 20%. You cannot match it without repricing your entire rent roll downward. Meanwhile, your staged increases finally cross the threshold. Churn spikes instead of absorbing. Occupancy slides from 90% to 80. Delinquencies climb with it. You run lean sales to clear the non-paying units. On one of them, a notice goes out late. That becomes a wrongful sale claim, and now you are explaining your procedures to a lawyer. And then the part that hurts most, invisible on the income statement. Cap rates widen from 6% to 7. Your income fell, and the multiple applied to it fell at the same time. That is the trap in any business valued on a multiple. Both numbers move together and always in the same direction. So who is this business for? The operating yield is real. The buildings are cheap and fast to put up. But the actual return is not collected from tenants. It is harvested at sale from the multiple, which means this rewards operators, not owners. The person who reprices, automates, and sells. And it punishes whoever buys a steel building expecting it to quietly pay forever. Because the honest description of this industry is uncomfortable. You are not renting out space. You are monetizing the distance between what someone agreed to pay and what they will tolerate rather than rent a truck on a Saturday. That gap is the product. Everything else is the building it is stored in. If this was useful, subscribe. We are working through the businesses that look simple from outside.